When we learn about geometry concepts, we're going to be studying different shapes and their vocabulary. Math has its own set of words that you need to learn. The geometry vocabulary will help us understand, classify, and make different shapes. There's also a special way to read and write some of the geometry vocabulary. Our first vocabulary word is the word point, and this means an exact location in space. And so when we're talking about a point, we're simply just talking about what looks like a circle or a period, and it will typically be labeled with a letter. So for this picture, we would write it point A, and we would say it the same way, point A. So whatever letter's labeled next to the point is what you would call it. Our next word is a line segment, and this is a part of a line between two end points. So if we have a line, it's going to have a point on each end, and that's what makes it a line segment. And those points are going to be labeled with a letter. So for this one, we would call it line segment BC. And the way that we write it is we write the letters BC with a little line above it. Notice that when we write it, the line above it doesn't have arrows on the end. This line segment is just the section between those 2 points. A line is a straight path of points that continues without end in both directions. So when we talk about a line, it's going to continue without end, so forever and ever, both directions. So it's going to have an arrow on each side to show that it keeps going. And both ends of the line are going to be labeled with a letter. So we would read that line DE, and we would write it by writing the 2 letters and having a line above it that has arrows on both sides. It doesn't matter what letters go with the picture, it just helps us to be able to read the figure. A ray is a part of a line that has one end point and continues without end in one direction. This is kind of a combination of a line and a line segment. So on one end, it's going to have a point, and then on the other end, it's going to have an arrow. So this one starts here at point F, and then it continues without stopping in the other direction. So we would call that ray FG. So the way that we write it is we write the letters, and then on the line on the top has an arrow on one side. This could go any way. It could go up and look like that. It could go from have the point on the right and go forever on the left. Okay, it doesn't matter. Next we have perpendicular lines. Perpendicular lines are lines that intersect to form 4 right angles. So if we have a line going up and down and a line going left to right, and we labeled these, so let's say this is line DE and this is line FG. These lines would be perpendicular because right here where they cross, where they intersect, each side of that is a right angle, makes a square corner. You could also see it drawn where it looks like this. So even though this line isn't going all the way across, it's still perpendicular lines because where they meet, it makes a right angle. Let me go back. The way that we write that is using this little funny looking symbol right here. So we write line DE, we write line FG, and we put that symbol in the middle. And the way that we would say that is we would say that line DE is perpendicular to line FG. So that symbol that I circled in yellow means perpendicular. Parallel lines are lines that are always the same distance apart and they never intersect. So if we have line LM and line NO, these lines are never going to cross. So if they go on forever and ever, which we've learned that they do when they have those arrows, they're never going to cross each other. That's what makes them parallel. So we could also see parallel lines that are slanted. We might see parallel lines like this. If we had two lines that looked like this, they would not be parallel because they're going to continue forever and eventually they're going to cross. So that would be a non-example. Those are not parallel. Even though they're not crossing in the picture, they're going to cross eventually. When we write it, we use a symbol. It looks like two little L's that are close together. That means parallel. So we would say line LM is parallel to line NO. Intersecting lines are lines that cross at exactly one point. So with this vocabulary, it doesn't matter what type of angle they make when they cross. They just have to cross somewhere. So a way that you might see it a lot, so we have line H and I. Here's line J and K. These would be intersecting lines because they are crossing each other. And that point where they cross is also labeled sometimes. So if we say that's point X, we would read and write this by saying that line HI and JK intersect at point X. So we're going to name that exact point where they cross each other. They're only going to cross one time. The line's not going to curve around and cross again. Okay, now we're going to talk about our types of angles. There's three main types of angles that we're going to talk about. A right angle is an angle that forms a square corner. So when we have an angle, we're really talking about two rays that share a point. So here's their point. If I can get my pen to draw. Here we go. So we could say that this is P, this is Q, and this is R. And right here where they meet, it makes a right angle. It's a square corner. And a right angle is exactly 90 degrees. And later we're going to be learning how to measure those degrees. But a right angle measures exactly 90 degrees. And we use this little symbol for the word angle. We use that same symbol whether it's a right angle, an acute angle, or an obtuse angle. And we use the three letters P, Q, and R to name it. So we would say that this is angle PQR. We could also call it angle Q. So you might see it written a couple of different ways. An acute angle is an angle that is less than a right angle. It opens up less. So that would be an acute angle. So we could say RST. So again, we have that same symbol for angle. It's angle RST. And this opening right here is smaller than 90 degrees. So it's less than 90 degrees. One way you can remember is, oh, it's so little and cute. It's small. It's smaller than a right angle. Our last angle we're going to talk about is an obtuse angle, and that is an angle that is greater than a right angle. When we're talking about greater, I don't mean that the lines or the rays are longer. I mean that the opening is wider than a square. It's wider than a right angle. So this is TUV, then we would read it angle TUV. So an obtuse angle opens up more than 90 degrees. One thing that I sometimes see people do is say, okay, here's a right angle. So this is an obtuse angle because it's bigger. It's still a right angle. It still makes a square corner. Does not matter how long you make the rays. When we talk about being bigger, greater, we're looking at that opening. So this would be a right angle where the dotted line is, and you can see that the one that I've made is opened wider than that. So it's obtuse. Okay, so that vocabulary is really important to help you when we start classifying our different shapes and making different shapes. So make sure you keep this information nearby so you can look back at it to help you.